Okay, so the NRL is planning to take matches to the USA from 2024 onwards. They initially planned to take them this season, but South Sydney pulled out of their match overseas against Manly, citing logistical issues and the short notice of the idea with the NRL, but they're happy to go in 2024. So it seems that the clubs are on board with this as well. Obviously, the one major sticking point right now is the ongoing CBA standoff between the RLPA and the NRL. Obviously, I think the players will obviously have to, be in favour of playing overseas, because that could then create issues in order to get the games played. Obviously, the NRL has realised there is an economic opportunity by doing this. They don't want this to be a gimmick. They obviously want this to be a long-term plan they put in place to grow the fan base and possibly ultimately the player base in the US. They obviously see it as a growth market. They see what the major leagues in North America are doing with taking regular and pre-season games to Europe and to Latin America, in Major League Baseball's case, for example, and growing their player and fan base in those locations. They've seen how successful, like the NFL's been with the London and then now the German series. They've seen how the NHL has rotated around the European countries for many, many years. And they've seen how the NBA started off in London, now has gone to Paris, taking regular season games as well. And obviously Major League Baseball has brought onto that gravy train in recent years. So they've seen the success that the major leagues in North America have had by taking games overseas. The NHL is now planning to take games to Australia, and that, is a big thing. And so the NRL, obviously wanting to tap into the American market, they're competing with the AFL for the American dollar, because the AFL has also grown in popularity in recent seasons following the resumption of play in May 2020, following the initial lockdown during the COVID pandemic. So the facts and the figures back up the economics behind it. But are NRL fans in Australia in favour? And are the players on board? Because the clubs seem to be. The clubs would have had a big say with the NRL when it comes to various meetings about the state of the game, whether they're in favour or against. It seems that the clubs are on board. The NRL obviously wanted to already be playing games there, but South Sydney raised a few concerns, which is their prerogative. But then you've got to look at some of the clubs have American money. They've also got to look at competing with the AFL for not only the domestic Australian dollar, but the overseas earnings as well. Now, the AFL has also had a surge in popularity in the US during the COVID lockdown, which has been sustained, and there's American players playing in the AFL. So this is a big thing for the NRL. They also want to tap into not only that potential fan base and the existing fan base, which clearly is, because there's a massive Polynesian South Sea Pacific Island community in states like Utah and California, which already exists. There's American money in several teams in the NRL, predominantly South Sydney and Manly, with their ownership groups, which include Russell Crowe and the Penn family. So there's American finance already in the game, and this is not a new idea. Going back to the 80s, they were taking games over. They obviously did a State of Origin game. Now, that was a different time, and the globalisation of sport has really occurred in that time. And so there is this economic aspect, but also it does possibly increase the not only the fan base, but the player pool. Because we've seen the impact that rugby union has had in the US domestically, and how the growth in popularity of rugby union. Rugby league fears being getting left behind, and the NRL, I think, are right. In my opinion, could they go about it with a bit more transparency? Possibly, but this idea isn't new. So what do Australian and Kiwi fans feel about it? Obviously, the NRL has shown itself to be very, very flexible on the logistical side of things. Domestically in Australia and New Zealand, about getting games played following the resumption of play. They successfully hosted the New Zealand Warriors for the better part of 3 years in Australia. They operated the Queensland bubble very, very successfully. They rearranged State of Origin in 2020 very successfully. So they got experience in the last few years of really being very flexible in getting games played and setting up logistical hubs to get games played during the worst of the pandemic. So they have that experience now, which should allay fears, but the ongoing CBA negotiations could be a sticking point. And where do they play a game in the US, or games? How many games will they ultimately take per season? And could this eventually, could State of Origin be played in the US at some point? Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on the proposal to take NRL regular season games, or pre-season games for that matter, to the US from next year onwards. Is this a good thing for the NRL or a bad thing for the NRL? Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.